Hello, and welcome to the ALN 2020 Asset Leadership Forum, Restructuring America. I'm Nick Kanoki, the producer and the Director of Technology at the Asset Leadership Network, and I am very excited to be starting off today's event, Restructuring Infrastructure, Policy, and Strategy. One note before we begin: if you're an attendee, a participant, if you're watching, and you have a comment or a question, please write it in the chat or use the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar, because we'd love to hear from you and answer your questions or comments. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike Bordenero, ALN Director Communications, and Dr. Kofi Smith.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's our great pleasure today to have Dr. Kofi Smith with us. He is the CEO of the Atlanta Airline Terminal Corporation, which is the first airline terminal in the country to be certified in ISO 55001. And in our preliminary talk, I was excited to learn how much they're going to be expanding their ISO 55001 program. So we look forward to seeing that. Then we're going to hear from the GAO, the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Amelia Secoy is going to be speaking, and we're going to have a really dynamic panel with a number of speakers who will introduce later on. But without further ado, Dr. Smith, I will be sharing my screen and your presentation. So we'll get started with that. And just let me know when you want to advance.
Yes, sir. Well, Mike, thank you so much for having me today. It is certainly an honor and a privilege to join all of you. And I'm very excited about sharing what we've been able to accomplish here at the world's busiest airport. I'm going to walk us very quickly through this. I definitely want to leave time for any questions, Mike, that you might facilitate. So what I'd like to start off is kind of give everyone just a profile of the world's busiest airport, talk a little bit about AATC so you'll know who we are, the why behind ISO 55001, the keys to success as we mark them, and some golden nuggets for everyone to take away. So Mike, if you wouldn't mind, thank you so much, and you can go ahead and click through this. So Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the economic effect that we have is 448,000 jobs. We are the largest employment center in Georgia. 4.2 billion of the money that is generated here is total annual payroll. And if you think about how that converts into a direct or indirect economic impact, is 6.6 billion. So whenever we talk about the world's busiest airport, whenever I get the privilege of talking about the world's busiest airport, I love touting off these numbers, 4.2 billion, 6.6 billion, because I get to use that word billion. And being a little country boy from Alabama, it was hard pressed for me to even understand what $100,000 were. I mean, a million, you're really blowing my brain, but now I get to talk about billions. So I love this whole thing, show me the money when it comes to our world's busiest airport. Next slide, Mike. So if you look at the profile of this airport, 100 million plus passengers pre-COVID, obviously. We were doing 300,000 passengers a day, 21 consecutive years of being the world's busiest airport, and 2,500 plus flights per day, 16 consecutive years being the most efficient airport. And you all may know this or may not, but 150 plus US cities we can reach within 2 hours, 70 plus international cities. 150 plus US cities that we can reach a direct flight, and 70 plus international cities that we can reach as a direct flight. And then 80% of the US population in 12 major cities we can reach within a 2-hour flight. So let's talk a little bit about the Atlanta Airlines Terminal Corporation. So when you think about AATC, we were chartered and formed back in 1979. The airlines and the city at the time were very forward thinking in the construction of Atlanta Airlines Terminal Corporation. Now we're Atlanta Airlines Terminal Company. And the whole premise was to create an organization that could maintain all of the building operations, facility maintenance on behalf of our carriers, since they are the ones burdened with the upkeep of this 7.2 million square feet. Again, 94 full-time employees, but we have about 1,200 contract employees under us. That's across 47 contracts. So when you think about this organization, it's a relatively small organization, under 100 full-time employees. Yes, we do have about 1,200 contract employees under us, but we're a pretty small company managing the world's busiest airport, spanning across the 7.2 million square feet, somewhere around $170 million of annual operating and capital improvement budget. So this little bitty company of 94 employees, since I've been here in 2010, we've done to the tune of somewhere close to $650 million worth of capital improvement projects here at the airport. So why ISO 55001? And there's a plethora of reasons why we embarked on this journey back in 2016 and then reinvigorated ourselves in 2017 to get the certification in 2018. But these reasons are: reduce operating costs, extend the useful life and value of assets, enhance the reliability and performance of those assets, improve awareness and response to risk, fewer disruptions and more rapid recoveries, organizational alignment of business goals and objectives, and consistent decision-making with approved communication throughout the organization. And let me just say one thing very quickly in reference to these reasons. And all of you who are watching, who are either on some pursuit of ISO certification or are considering the pursuit of ISO certification, we were very fortunate to do this in 2000, started a journey 2016, reinvigorated 2017, certified in 2018. Because we were able to implement all of the key learnings and lessons of this standardizing how we make decisions and how we lead this organization, we were in a much better position to get sucker punched by COVID-19 in 2020. Understanding that we were already looking at all of our risks, going through our PESTO, going through our SWOT analysis, and making that a part of our culture. When we got hit as a global community with COVID-19, AATC, because of ISO and the journey that we did with 55001, we were able to respond very quickly as opposed to having to get hit with COVID-19 and figure out what to do. So these were benefits and reasons that I had listed on the journey of ISO before we got hit with a global pandemic. So that is another reason why ISO is so beneficial to organizations and companies, because it prepares you for the unknown. Next slide, Mike. Thank you. So my main reason, this is what I love. My main reason for ISO 55001 is to take care of our people. So what do I mean by taking care of our people? Safety, tools, and empowerment. So all of us here that are on this webinar, those leaders, all of us who are leaders, we understand that people are our most valuable asset. And we have to do our best as leaders to ensure that our people are taken care of. Because if our people are taken care of, then your customers or clients, in my instance, my passengers, will be taken care of. If my people are taken care of, my shareholders will be taken care of. If my people are taken care of, then the stakeholders, the City of Atlanta, the mayor, the City Council, the Department of Aviation, all of our contract partners, they will all be taken care of. But it's people first. So when we think about taking care of our people, we got to make sure that our people are safe, obviously, taking care of their physical safety, and then of course during COVID, taking care of their financial safety. Give them the tools to be productive, give them the tools to be successful, and then empower them. This is what ISO does. If you institute and implement an ISO certification in our I-55001, then we are able to protect our people, we're able to give them the tools to be successful, and we're able to empower them to make better decisions based off of evidence-based management. Well, you create a better work life. You then create happier people. And then for our shareholders and our stakeholders, what comes out of that, Mike, the next point, increased productivity, which leads to everything that companies want. Increased value. Mike, if you hit the next one for me, increased shareholder value. So ISO sets you up to do that fundamental foundational component that all of us as leaders should be thinking about, which is how do we take care of our people? How do we create a better life for them? How do we make them happier? Because if you create a better life, work-life balance, all of that, if they're happier, then they're going to increase their productivity. They're also going to increase their loyalty to you too, which is a great byproduct. If their productivity increases, obviously that leads to increased shareholder value. Mike, thank you. So our first focus in 2017, and then where we got certified in 2018, our certificate was on our utility plants. So when you think about our central utility plants here at Hartsfield-Jackson, these plants basically power a city. So we like to look at ourselves as a big airport, but a little city. If you think about our cooling capacity, 23,000 tons of cooling, that's enough to cool 10,000 homes. Right behind that, when you think about the steam generation that we have here on campus, 115,000 pounds per hour. That's enough steam to power your largest steam locomotives. When we think about the electricity, 280 million kilowatts, that's enough power generated here at Hartsfield-Jackson to power 25,000 homes. And then water, our last major utility, 325 million gallons that we produce here, which is enough to supply 33,000 homes. So this is the reason why we look at ourselves as a small city. And you can imagine the utility plants are the heartbeat of this airport. So moving 2,500 planes a day, landing and departing, moving 300,000 passengers through this airport a day, close to 110 million passengers in 2019. We have to make sure that these utility plants do not stop. We have to make sure that they're working in the most efficient, effective manner, because if they stop, operations can stop. So the benefits of ISO 55001, you can keep going, Mike, thank you. Scroll on down. Was it worth the effort? Was it worth the effort? Global recognition of excellence, better fulfillment of fiduciary responsibilities to our shareholders. And this is important. So when all of you, and I'm going to get to some of the challenges and go to nuggets, but when you're thinking about moving forward with ISO, how do you do that? If you report to somebody, your boss or a board of directors, in my instance, you have to be able to articulate and communicate what is the benefit for them to invest in this effort. Because it's not just a financial investment that takes for the certification, some of the training, that's really small. That's almost marginal. The real investment is the investment of a president and the CEO and all of my vice presidents that are engaged in this, and the entire company that is engaged in it. And then you suck in all of our business partners. Now that number of certification, that's minute, but now all of the dollars associated with all of those salaries and the opportunity costs and the time, that's a huge investment. So you have to be able to articulate the benefit. Better fulfillment of fiduciary responsibilities to your shareholders, increase shareholder value. And that's what I showed you prior. You take care of your people, more productive, happier, increase shareholder value. Proof of commitment to the proof of commitment to world-class service. So for all of our stakeholders, the City of Atlanta, the mayor, her cabinet, the City Council, Department of Aviation, all of the different stakeholders, TSA, CBP, that touch this airport, us going on the journey, communicated how serious we are about serving this airport in a world-class manner. Assurance of superior asset management system, obviously. Awareness and implementation of best practices, documented processes and procedures. Documented processes and procedures. And I'm sure that many of you, like us, there's a huge void and a gap that can sometimes be found in the documented processes and procedures, because we're so busy running and trying to make things happen that we do not spend the appropriate time of standardizing our operating procedures and then documenting them and making sure that they are seamless and transferable no matter who comes into your organization. Positive culture shift, a positive culture shift. So since doing this, and I have to give kudos to my Vice President of Facilities, Mr. Gary Merrill, who is the subject matter expert when it comes to ISO, and along with the wonderful ladies that have helped us build out this program. Those are the ones that ran it for me. Donna and Jennifer and so many other names, Marshall and Tracy, they're amazing. And when you have people that are so committed to helping you put forward something that they know will change the culture, it becomes infectious. So you actually have, as a president or a CEO or a leader in whatever capacity that you are in, you actually have consigliaries for you now helping to elevate your culture and elevate the positive nature that exists throughout your culture by having individuals engage in this journey that are within your organization, which is very key. Next slide, Mike. So keys to success. Leadership, I just mentioned. I have to give a huge kudo and appreciation to my Vice President, Mr. Gary Merrill, who helped keep all of this together on the journey. But my other Vice Presidents, Steve Masico and Linda Dean, their commitment from a leadership standpoint filtrates all the way down to the organization. So we all know it must start at the top and it must filter down through the bottom. These three individuals, these three vice presidents, were always available. They were pushing to make sure throughout the entire organization, through all three of their divisions, that the ISO culture was penetrating throughout the organization. And for me, as the head coach of the organization, having some amazing coordinators with you that believe in increasing the culture and making the culture more positive, standardizing your practices, increasing shareholder value, having people on your team at the leadership level is critical. And I can't emphasize that enough. It is critical. A process like this must be led top down, but supported bottom up. So you have to be able to get the buy-in of your organization, and you can only do that through having great leadership. And I'm very blessed that I have three phenomenal leaders that have been with me on this journey. One of which, Rod Ozus, if you're watching, he retired and he was very instrumental in getting this up and started for us as well. Sell and educate your external stakeholders, big deal. Sell and educate your internal stakeholders. Surround yourself with the best people. That's basically what I just articulated to you. The leadership that I'm blessed to work with, I'm surrounded by incredible people, those who are a lot smarter than myself. And because they are phenomenal leaders, the organization follows them. Provide resources and stick to those who lead the effort. Provide resources and a stick to those who lead the effort. And what I mean by that is, again, remember, it must come from top down, the support and the commitment to what you're doing, but it must be led from the bottom up. And those ladies that I mentioned to you earlier, we had to empower them and we had to give them the stick to make sure they could get everybody else on board. So it wasn't just enough to say, hey, you're going to go lead this, and then you throw them out there to the wolves and they have no power or influence behind them. You need to make sure that you empower those. In my instance, letting the organization know that these ladies who are leading this effort has the full support of the president and CEO. So when they set a meeting, you need to attend the meeting. That's what we mean about providing the resources any training that they need, any financial support that they need, resources, but giving them the stick is the power to help move the organization. Lead from the top, empower from below, and be disciplined. Be disciplined. And I think of discipline, not discipline meaning go and brush your teeth every morning. I think about discipline as Jim Collins outlines, this fanatical discipline, meaning no matter what may happen during your time of pushing and implementing ISO, you do not get deterred. You do not get distracted. You make sure you understand the reason why you're doing it and do not let anyone sway you off of that why. Next slide, Mike. All right, we are almost done. So looking at the golden nuggets and the key takeaways, the insights. Champion, you need a champion, you need a team, and you need to provide the resources in order for this to be successful. Champion needs to be the person, whoever may be the highest within your organization or your division or department, that is the person that has to be a champion. That is the person that has to step out, send emails, participate, be available so that the organization understands that there's commitment there. Then you have to have a team. And again, I was very fortunate. I had a very cohesive and well put together team. So I didn't have to do a lot. Yes, there was an investment of my time, certainly, but I didn't have to be the one doing. I had an amazing team that was making sure everything got done. And then you have to provide them the resources. Challenge, as I mentioned, time commitment. Time commitment is huge because remember, I said it's all of these bodies, executives, vice presidents, CEO, then you have your staff, but then you have all of your business partners. That's a lot of coordination of people calendars. There's a lot of time putting together your asset management system. There's a lot of time creating and making sure your documents are right. So there's a huge time commitment that is involved. So that is challenging. And then obviously capturing buy-in. And I've kind of already listed out how you do that, how you capture the buy-in of your organization. The good, documenting tribal knowledge, obviously, right? Companies roll through people, be it 5 years, 10 years, we're always circling out those that are more senior, those who have been here a long time, they go off and they retire. You don't want to lose all that information. You have new people coming in. So ISO is a way of documenting and capturing all of that tribal knowledge that it continues to be passed down through your organization without running the risk of someone retiring and taking all that knowledge with them. And then obviously there's a huge culture shift. Make your people happy. They become more productive. You increase shareholder value. Mike? All right, so if I was in your shoes, which I was, and which I am, spend your time at the beginning of the journey, educating the entire team about ISO 55000 in our case. It's general principles, the main goal of what you want to accomplish, i.e. the strategic plans, the purpose and the value of each, and then the benefits of all the various processes. That's important. That's very, very important in order to check off that one bullet on the challenge, capturing buy-in. You do that by spending the time up front, educating people on why are we doing this? Why are we going to commit all of our time to this? What is the benefit? And there's always that, what is in it for me? This is how you arrest that, is communicating what ISO 55000 is, talking about the general principles, and then letting everybody know what the main goal is, but making that personal to each one of them so they understand the benefits and how it will impact them. Make the teams aware of the significant time commitment, right? So you don't want to surprise everybody. You want to let them know up front that it's going to be a lot of time that we're going to spend towards this, but you're already providing them with the why. So if you do it up front, people are not surprised, nor are they frustrated, and nor do you lose them during the process. So communicate that upfront. And then obviously, as I've reiterated several times, you want to ensure that you allocate the resources to the various groups of people that are involved in this journey. Next slide, Mike. And that is it for all of you. Mike, thank you so much. I want to open it up to you, Mike. Any questions that you might have based off of that presentation?
Well, we do have questions, but I'd like to say a few things. First of all, thank you very much. And second of all, we've been struggling with how to deal with people, because we don't want to say people are an asset. You know, we don't like that. But you really did a good job of showing the people part of ISO 55000 and the system. So thank you very much for that. And if you can, before we go to questions, talk a little bit about your future journey, because when we talked earlier, you said that you're expanding this. Where are you going with ISO 55000?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mike. So we actually expanded already. So we first did, as I mentioned in the presentation, our central utility plants. We were able to get them certified, and then we did the surveillance audit back in 2019. And then what we've been able to do is expand the program to our electrical infrastructure along with our vertical transportation. And that was a huge effort over this past year of expanding to not just one additional area, but two, both of which are very critical to the airport. And when you think about the vertical transportation here in the airport and the criticality of it, if you shut down the escalators, the elevators, and the move and walks while moving 300,000 passengers through your airport, you just create a major chokehold on getting airplanes off on time and moving people from gate to gate to get them to their flights. So Gary did a phenomenal job of assessing how should we expand it and which areas should we expand into. Now I'm going to tell you, Mike, and I'm just going to click over here. I'm not going to share the slide. I'm looking at another screen. But Gary has also laid out a 5-year plan into the future on how we continue to grow. And I'll just tell you really quick, on year 4 of our ISO journey, which would be 2021, we'll obviously recertify our central utility plants, but we're also going to add, and we'll also recertify our vertical transportation, the electrical distribution side of the house, but we're going to add in 2021 our baggage handling system, our alarm, and our alarm systems to that. So the life safety component, fire and life safety, we're going to add, and then we're going to add our water distribution and our wastewater in year 4. And then year 5 in 2022, we're going to do our roofing. So this 5-year journey that Gary has laid out really encompasses those major components, those major assets to this facility infrastructure.
Excellent. And you mentioned there were benefits to respond to COVID. Can you give us some examples of what those benefits were?
Yeah, so a part of ISO is putting together a risk registry, and obviously it's also all your documentations and your SOPs. So we had already been evaluating all the risks that we knew of that could potentially affect our organization through our pestle, right? So looking internally and externally, what are those things that could impact the organization? And in a very methodical way, we started spending time of checking off those risks. So when we got hit with COVID, we had already previously done such a great job of minimizing all of the other things that could have been amplified by COVID. We had already removed so many of those things that when we got into COVID, we only needed to figure out COVID, and we didn't have to figure out all of these other issues. And we all know from several companies that you've seen about on the news, CNBC, so many companies were already right with other issues that they needed to deal with, that when COVID hit, it was a straw that broke the camel back. We did the reverse. We started taking care of all of those risks and those issues through our ISO journey, that when COVID hit, we only needed to focus on COVID, and we didn't have the weight of all these other things eventually breaking the camel's back.
Okay, well, we have a bunch of other questions, but we don't have time. So I hope you don't mind if we send them to you and perhaps to us as a statement. And we talked earlier, and you said you were interested in championing ISO 55000 to Atlanta in general and to airports around the country, around the world. And we'd love to work with you in that regard and look forward to that. Thank you very much. We're going to have a presentation from the GAO and then a panel. If you would like to stick around, if you can, I know you're busy, but thank you for what you have done already. Really appreciate the great insights you provided.
I would not miss Amelia for anything. I will stick around and I will watch.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amelia Satroy is with the Government Accountability Office. She is Assistant Director for Infrastructure, and she has been with us for a few years now. We appreciate your support, and you have a number of recent reports and insights to provide to us, I believe. So are you able to share your screen? Has that been turned on?
Yes, let me. Just a sec.
Amelia has presented with us in the past at the National Academy of Sciences and in the U.S. Capitol Senate Conference facility. Are you having trouble with that?
It says only the host. Wait.
We need to turn on your capabilities. So if Nick, you can allow.
Amelia, I've made you a co-host, so you should
Oh,
have the capabilities,
okay.
but if it doesn't work, I'm standing by to
Okay.
share my screen.
Sorry for the delay. Let me try.
No problem.
Okay. Can you see it? Can you see it now?
Yes, we can. All right. Thank
Okay. I'm going to do the slideshow version. Sorry for the delay. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on GAO. I know there are a number of people in the audience, and I'm not sure. Generally, in my experience with your conferences, people are familiar with GAO, but I'll just give you a brief background. GAO does work at the request of Congress. We are an independent agency, and we respond to their request by designing our work and developing the scope and methodology, and then providing them with a description of what we are going to do. Our work is not directed by Congress, but it is at their request. So throughout the work, the course of the engagement, we consult and we make sure that they are in agreement with what we are doing. We usually try to do our work to make our work bipartisan for both the majority and the minority. And the work that I'm going to speak about today that is the case for these reports that I'm going to speak about. The work is under the authority of the Controller General, who serves a term of 15 years and is appointed by the President and confirmed by Congress. Jean Dodaro is our current Controller General and has been in that position for a while. And that's a brief introduction, and I'll get started with the presentation. I work in our physical infrastructure group, which oversees a number of areas. And the area that I generally work in is real property and now doing some personal property work. We also handle issues such as transportation, fleet, aviation, and a number of other physical infrastructure related issues. I'm going to talk about 3 projects that make up part of our body of work on infrastructure. One is a report that was issued about 2 years ago, where we established an asset management framework and what we're calling key characteristics of an asset management framework. This work is largely based on ISO 55000. So when I speak about this framework, I am speaking largely about ISO 55000, but you'll hear that my presentation is going to be focused on this framework that we developed. In order to do this framework, I'll explain what we did in a couple of slides. The next report I'm going to speak about is one that was issued in September, just a few weeks ago, about the Food and Drug Administration's property management. And that I'm going to speak on that one mostly about personal property. And the next one is an ongoing engagement, and I don't have results to report for you, but I can speak about what we're doing in this engagement. And this one I'm very interested in because it's about what we're calling natural disaster resilience, or resilience to climate change, climate-related disasters in the context of asset management. And some of you likely are doing work on this as well. This is our asset management framework, which some of you have seen before. This is the framework that we developed in our report GAO 1957, and it is largely based on ISO 55000. However, we also looked at other leading practices, and we looked at the IIMM, and we interviewed experts and a couple of other sources. But in order to develop this graphic, I would say it was mostly ISO 55000 that fed into it. But we broke it up looking at 4 phases. As you can see, organizational strategic planning is in the top. What we're calling asset management strategy and planning, which includes several elements of the asset management process: decision-making, risk management, data and information, and then the life cycle process that many of you are familiar with: acquiring, operating, and maintaining and disposing of assets. And then a review process, which should feedback or inform your planning. So we see it as all related, which it should be, and that's what this graphic is intended to illustrate. And this is the framework that we've been using. This is the framework that we use to inform our work on the 2 engagements that I am going to talk about. It's also being used on a couple of other engagements. We have an ongoing engagement looking at the Department of Veterans Affairs and their management of their physical property, their capital assets. That work is also underway. I'm not going to speak about that today because I think there's not quite enough time for that. The next slide is the characteristics that line up with the asset management framework that I just showed you. And we developed, we call them the 6 key characteristics. This is just a high-level view of these characteristics. And these also were developed through an extensive set of interviews with experts who had a lot of experience. Some of you might be attending. It's different when you do these things virtually. You can't see who's in the audience, but some of you might be listening. And this was a long process that we went through of interviewing experts, reviewing literature on asset management, also incorporating the ISO 55000 standard. We came up with these characteristics that we thought all of them were necessary. And in the presentation that you just gave, you mentioned several of these as well, such as leadership support and the portfolio's value. I don't think these should be a surprise to anyone. And we did not see these as sequential. We did not see these as, one has to come before the other. We thought all of these were equally important. So don't take the list to be an intention that one should come first. I'll speak about the background of our FDA report. The Food and Drug Administration has regulatory centers, which you may know, I'm the speaker view is somewhat obscuring my slides. I wonder how I can fix that.
You can drag and move it around, but it has a propensity to always be in the way.
Okay.
Wherever you drag it, yes.
Okay. Um, let me try. Oh, I see. Okay. All right. I can move it down. Okay. Basically, we looked at 3 of the FDA's regulatory centers, which is the majority of the centers' work. The 3 centers are CBER, which is the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, CEDAR, which is the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, and CEDAR-H, which is the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. Mostly these centers work on human medical product safety, security, and effectiveness. That means vaccines, blood products, drugs, and medical devices. And then the focus was mostly on personal property. I'm not going to talk much about real property because the property that they use is owned by GSA. They have a lease with GSA for their facilities, the ones that we looked at. The reason for doing this work is that Congress included a provision in statute for GAO to examine FDA's expenses at these 3 centers. And the reason for that is there's going to be an authorization for a reauthorization taking effect in 2023. And there will be more restrictions on how FDA can use the user fees that it gets from industry. So when a pharmaceutical company applies to FDA for approval of a drug, just for example, they pay a fee to FDA to review their application. And similar to a device or a manufacturing company, they pay a fee to FDA. Those fees will be, well, the process is already starting for negotiation, but the way in which those fees can be used is going to be included in the reauthorization that takes effect as of fiscal year 2023. So that's just in 2 years. And the reason, 2 or 3 years. The reason why that's important is that the user fees fund a lot of the personal property. We looked at the budgets from 2012 to 2019, and we saw that 56% of the funding was used for, 56% of the funding, or the way the funding was spent, was user fees. So with more restrictions on the user fees, there could be an impact on how FDA can fulfill its mission. So I'm going to skip ahead. Basically, this bottom of this slide tells you a little bit about our methodology, but I'm going to go to the next slide. What we found when we looked at this work is we were going to apply our 6 key characteristics, and as we did the work, we found that 2 of the 6 were most relevant. So what I'm trying to focus on here is that you don't necessarily have to apply all 6 characteristics if they're not applicable. What we found was that FDA was not, in this case, was not advanced in terms of asset management for personal property. So we found that they were not using quality data, which is one of the characteristics, or establishing formal plans and policies. In that seemed to be the way that made most sense for focusing our work. Without that, they really were not able to meet the requirements of their mission, in order to do the reporting that would be necessary to show how their user fees were fulfilling the use of user fees were fulfilling their mission, and in order for us to provide the information that we needed to provide to Congress. So this is an example of the lab equipment. This is personal property. If you look to the right and the left, these are refrigeration units where they would keep things like samples, blood samples, and other types of samples for testing. That's just an example of one of the things we saw. We were able to look in the labs. Couldn't enter all of the labs because of the biosafety levels. These are some examples of what we found. For their personal property assets include scientific and laboratory equipment, which could be a number of things that are mission related. Also, information technology is what allows the scientists to do their jobs. This is not only computers, but the technology that they use for testing, some of the advanced technology that they use in order to do their basic work. And then some less specialized things like office furniture that they use in the labs, and also just that they use for their offices. There's been a large increase in the number of staff at FDA because, as you may know, there are many more drugs out on the market. Pharmaceutical companies have had a lot of growth over the last many years, and therefore FDA has hired a lot of staff. And so they've needed a lot more of this equipment and also more space. We found that for all of the 3 phases of the asset that I showed in the framework in the beginning, basically asset management and strategy, asset lifecycle delivery, and review. I'm using slightly different words in this slide, but that's what I'm talking about. For all of these phases, we did not see that they had good quality information or formal plans and processes. So there are a few examples here. There's a lot more in our report. For example, they did not have a good process. They had very informal processes for collecting information and identifying personal property needs. We found that the 3 centers did not do things the same way. And in some cases, the centers share information or share resources. So it's important that they have the same way of doing things. For example, CBER and CEDAR both do evaluation and research. One is on drugs and the other is on biologics, but they're doing similar work. And they were collecting information in different ways. Also, they didn't have a consistent way of setting priorities. They didn't seem to link their priorities in terms of their needs to FDA's mission. So they had ways of saying what they needed. Again, these were very informal. For example, a lab manager would put in a request for property, say a certain type of diagnostic tool, but they would not have a real method for doing that. And they did not have a good database for showing what they already had, for documenting what the condition of equipment was. That gets into operations and maintenance, which is the 3rd bullet. They just didn't have a good way of tracking the condition of equipment or assessing on a regular basis what the condition was. And in some cases, a couple of the centers share labs, which is a good thing because they're making better use of resources, but they're not sharing information on operating and maintaining the labs. And then a final point in terms of review or evaluation, which is the last level in our framework. They didn't use information to set goals or to make decisions, to review or to document progress toward goals. So much of this is about documentation and also information collecting and managing information. Those are just some highlights. We made recommendations, which I'm sure you can guess, that they should establish plans and policies for doing this. And we broke it down in terms of planning, which we put in the context of being able to link their decisions to their goals, operations and maintenance in terms of tracking condition, and maintenance and repair costs, and then review or evaluation in terms of measuring and documenting performance. FDA did concur with our recommendations. It would have been hard for them not to agree, and they say that they're going to do this. I think part of the reason for them not doing this, not to give them an excuse, but they have been over the last several years really inundated with applications. As I said, the pharmaceutical and device industries have grown very quickly. And as many of us know, I think when you have a lot of growth, or it's not exactly a crisis, but they're really overwhelmed. Sometimes planning and management are not focused on as much as they should be. But our argument in terms of asset management is that that's exactly the time when you need to consider these things. They become even more important, because if you don't know what you have, you don't know what you need. And the whole concept behind asset management is that you have to maximize the return on your investment, or maximize your portfolio's value, even for personal property. So I'm going to quickly turn to our ongoing work, which is, as I said, I can't give you results from this, but this is looking at natural disaster resilience. GAO issued a product, 2100 SP, which I think Mike sent out recently in an ALN newsletter. And this is a conceptual framework for looking at natural disaster resilience. GAO has defined, I'm giving you the definition here, but basically GAO has defined natural disaster resilience as, it's a long definition, but preparing for anticipated hazards, adapting to changing conditions, and withstanding and recovering rapidly from disruptions caused by natural disasters. So that is the definition that we are using, since GAO already had one. And what we're doing here, which I find interesting, is using the concepts from this framework and also our key characteristics from our asset management framework to see how well agencies are integrating resilience into asset management, how well, or if at all, they are integrating resilience into asset management. So just one example, one of the concepts in the disaster resilience framework is that you need to prioritize resilience goals that reflect the most pressing challenges. And that is directly related to one of our key characteristics in the framework, that is maximizing an asset portfolio's value. So that's what we are doing in this work. We are looking at the relationship between the concepts in the natural disaster framework or disaster resilience framework and our key characteristics, and we're going to see whether agencies have actually taken into account resilience in terms of asset management. And this work is about halfway done, so we expect to issue it in April, hopefully, if things go well. But this is of interest, as many of you know. There's a lot of focus on climate change, and this year with the wildfires and a record number of hurricanes and other things around the world, I'm looking forward to this report. I think it will be timely, and I think it will be very interesting. I'm not going to go through this now, but these are some details. Are you going to be posting the slides or sending the slides?
Yes, posting
Okay,
it.
so this gives you the details of the 6 key characteristics for anyone who wants to look at them later. And this gives you the reference for our reports. And that's it.
Well, it's not it. That is amazing is what that is. It is very heartwarming to see that you're building on your work from 1957 and showing other agencies and pointing them to that framework, and the fact that you're combining it with the natural disaster framework. It's just, what can we do to help you bring this level of information to the agencies?
Well, I'll have to think more about that, but we'll definitely stay in touch and be interested in working with you.
Excellent. Well, if you would like to stay on the panel, we have a number of questions, but due to time limitations, I'm going to ask you also if we can send you some questions and we can share those with the people who have asked them.
Sure. I see someone asking for my email. It's on the slides. So when you send out the slides, my email will be there.
Yeah. So if the other panelists can turn on their cameras, Mildred Chuas from the Metropolitan Transit Administration in New York City. We've got Marty Rowland from New York City Parks, but he's also developing an ASTM standard on infrastructure. We've got Dragan Komlajen. Dragan, if you can turn on your camera, and thank you, Dr. Smith, for joining us. Mildred, why don't you start with making a statement about what you're up to. What we're going to do is go through each of the panelists, remaining panelists, let them make a statement. We got some with slides, and then we'll have some discussion.
Okay, I think Nick was going to flash them on the screen for me.
Okay,
Nick?
I will do that.
If you can, please. Thank
Sure.
you.
Mm-hmm.
So while that's going up, thank you so much for the opportunity this afternoon to share our story. I'm from New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority. We are known as the largest transportation organization in North America with, the next slide, please, will show, yes, our operating agencies. I think we have 6 of them. New York City Transit, buses, 2 of the largest commuter railroads, the tolling agency, bridges and tunnels, as well as a capital construction and development company. So it's quite massive. We have a $1 trillion asset base that we maintain, and we operate 24/7. Except in COVID environment, you know, we'd had to scale back a little bit and have time for cleaning operations at night. But for the most part, we've always operated as 24/7. So as you can see, the complexity of our organization, the next slide, please, Nick. We have a lot of different views of asset management at the MTA. When you have so many different agencies, we're very diverse, but at the same time, you know, the different perspectives, and everybody seems to be working like within their own, what do you call it, towers or centers of excellence, right? And so for us, asset management really needed to be integrated. ISO 55000 obviously is the way to go in terms of connecting all the dots, so to speak, in the organization. So the next slide, please. This is what we have as an asset management system that we've developed in 2016. Is actually a multi-layered approach. Like we work together to do a gap assessment, understood like where all of our deficiencies are, and each agency came through and developed this asset management policy that was issued from the very top, then Chairman Tom Prendergast. And from there were separate layers that were developed, different dimensions. One of them is an organizational framework that just basically says this is how we operate as an entire organization. So it's not just about asset management, it is about every single function in the organization and how we interact with each other. The next layer, though, is focused on investment planning and asset management in particular, and looking at the life cycle of an asset and what are the roles and responsibilities of all these different functions in our organization, how they connect again, and how they interact, right? The next layer is probably the most interesting one that we really are very proud of at the MTA. We just completed what we call a business capabilities model, which is literally, I call it a digital twin of the organization, because it has 4 different dimensions. It has the people dimension, so all our organizational designs, our org charts, the people, everything is in there. The second layer is going to be your business processes. And the third layer is your systems and tools that you use to support your processes. And the fourth layer is the data that's in those systems and tools and what you use for reporting. So when you look at this model, it's in a software called Eris. We developed a baseline so that now, as we are moving towards a transformation, an organizational transformation in New York, we are using this as a baseline to then begin making the improvements that we need to make so that we will forever have this repository of information as a knowledge management tool. So something that Dr. Coffey actually had mentioned, which is document your tribal knowledge, right? This is the tribal knowledge of the MTA. It was developed by the MTA staff for the MTA. And as we are moving, I'm sure most people have heard that our organization is actually undergoing an organizational transformation that's been mandated by New York State. We are using it as a tool to capture the knowledge and to document everything as well. So we're very excited about this. We have developed a roadmap for asset management at the MTA, which we have. I don't have a slide on it because it's been adjusted 3 times already in 1 year, from the fact that we had to shift towards transformation to COVID environment to the post-COVID environment, and planning for that future, that new normal is something that has really taken our roadmap into many different directions. But we always have an anchor, and this is our anchor, our management system. It always brings us back. It always channels us back to what are the outcomes that we really need to do in our organization. So thank you very much. I ran right through that very quickly so that there's time for everyone.
Thank you for doing that. And I was going to ask you about the program that you've set up in the area, but we've been joined by Len Caputo, who is the asset manager for New York Energy. And so, Len, can you pick up kind of where Mildred left off and talk about how you're working together on that program?
Sure. Len Caputo with the New York Power Authority. I'm the Director of Asset Information. I just joined because I had previous meetings, so I'm not exactly sure what Mildred, the connection to Mildred. So
what we talked about the other day and how you're working together in a new commission for the
The New York Academy of Sciences that we discussed the other day.
oh,
New
sure,
York
sure.
Academy
Yes.
of Sciences.
Yeah.
So we, Mildred and I were part of a conversation with the academies, and we just had an initial kickoff meeting yesterday to start to understand the framework that they are trying to put together and the components of that framework, and how we, the New York Power Authority, the MTA, Port Authority, can potentially participate in that in different areas of that framework to help build it out and have others participate as we move forward. But just yesterday was our kickoff meeting, and it was very high level, but for sure, the MTA and the Power Authority will be contributing to that.
And there will be, it will be informed by ISO 55000?
Yes,
Definitely.
definitely.
Okay, so thank you for making that link. Now, can you just give a general description of your activities
Sure.
and how you use ISO 55000?
Yeah, so just by way of a little background, again, New York Power Authority, asset management is and was and still is one of our 6 strategic initiatives. Last year, we became ISO 55000 certified. We're nearing the completion of our surveillance audit now, 1 year later. So we're working through that as I speak. It's part of the reason why I was a little delayed and have to leave a little early. But we are certified as of last year. So asset information, the IAM defines asset information as a combination of data about physical assets used to inform decisions about how they're managed both for short-term operational purposes and long-term strategic planning. For NYPA, we like to say within the asset information group, it's getting the right information to the right people at the right time with the right technology to help make short and long-term decisions around our assets. And we really have taken the posture that data is an asset for us. So whether that's through our newly formed data governance committee at an enterprise level, or the relationship of my asset information group, my group, to that data governance committee, all around helping improve asset information, data quality for the Power Authority. Some of the key tenets for us is, for asset managers, is leveraging technology and data to better monitor our performance of our assets, shared decision-making around our data, focus on continual improvement and optimizing customer value. And yesterday, when we had our sort of preliminary discussion around the topic, it was mentioned about COVID and COVID response. So I thought that was key because as part of our surveillance audit that's occurring, a lot of the questions are pivoting around our response to COVID. And so I thought I would just touch on a few key points. For us, it was evaluating our current O&M activities, including outages, prioritization of work that could be paused, and which work needed to continue. Work that was required for regulatory purpose or operational needs continued. But the reason I bring this up is because at the foundation of all of this is good quality, sound data. You can't do a lot of the things I just described around pausing O&M activities, prioritization of work, unless you have good data to support why you're making those decisions, primarily around operation, risk, and performance. As part of that, we established an incident command center, which allowed us to have centralized decision-making, increasing the speed and efficiency of our reporting decisions. So, as an overview of asset information, it exists throughout the asset management system, as we all know. Asset information is a shared responsibility across many groups of personnel and applications and systems. And that's one key point that we really drove home through this effort, is that it's really a shared responsibility. It's not the asset information group's responsibility. It's not IT's responsibility. It's the responsibility of the enterprise to really have good asset information. Just touching on a few key points here, hopefully. So what is the scope of asset information as we defined it for our ISO activities? We have all of NYPA's information. We then broke that down to asset information that comprised of documented information, undocumented information, structured and unstructured data. And that's the tack we took to first starting to look at our data. We built an asset information management system as part of ISO and the requirements of it, 7.5 information requirements and 7.6 documented information, both of which myself and my group were work stream leads of. But it's the information management system is based on the Plan, Do, Check, Act. It's initially focused on Maximo, which is our enterprise asset management system. And it provides a framework for expansion to other information systems. And it includes things like our asset information strategy document, which, just to give you a little background on that, as we were progressing through the requirements of ISO, we established an asset information strategy document that comprised of looking at what is the scope of asset information, what is our current state, what is our to-be state, and what are the gaps, and what is the roadmap for us to close those gaps around asset information. So it really comprised of interviews of many people within the Power Authority to understand what their requirements were around asset information, the systems that they use, the data that they use, and in particular where they saw gaps of where we are and where we wanted to be as an organization. And through that, we developed, I'm sorry, did somebody have a question?
Yeah, Len, can I ask you to say specifically what some of the benefits were with COVID when you had all this in line?
Yeah, so one of the things for sure that we were able to do was we were able to prioritize the work that we have across all of our facilities. And if the work wasn't deemed to be of high priority for things like operations or safety or regulatory, it was put on pause. And we were able to demonstrate to the auditors who were just here for the surveillance audit that we had a good plan in place to be able to do that, and that we were able to still continue our operations, produce power, but at the same time, we put on pause things that were not of the significance of regulatory compliance or safety.
Excellent.
So we had a demonstrated process through our gated process through our utility operations performance system, where projects go through a gated process and then they have certain criteria as they're moving through the gate. So part of that evaluation was to look at all the projects in the portfolio, determine which ones met that criteria that I just mentioned. And if they didn't, they were put on pause unless there was a very good reason for them to continue. And that very good reason had to go up to our chief operating officer for approval.
Excellent. So for the sake of time, we're now going to move on to Marty Rowland, who has 3 really concise slides that sum up a significant body of work.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I appreciate the opportunity to make this short presentation. I'm going to be real quick so I can give enough time to Dragan to make his. So could Nick, could you bring up the slides?
Will do, Marty. 1 second.
And just before the slides come up, yesterday we were talking about how to benchmark municipal services, and then there was a question about the how could we respond to Flint? Well, let me go through these slides because that kind of addresses that. So in the idea of infrastructure service delivery, there's 3 standards that are very important. And it's important to understand that we're talking about a sector here. So we're talking about the sector of municipal government, various sizes. So let me go through the various, or the 3 standards and show how they work together. So the next slide goes into the what ISO 55000 is, and a very precise statement here is that the standard addresses 3 things: activities directly on assets, and then there's strategies to derive value. Very important distinction. And the last one is the coordination to improve behaviors. So with all 3 of those working, you get the benefit of ISO 55000. The next standard is the one that I was working to develop. It has been passed and it's available. This is where you engage recipients of the services. So you're reaching out to the people who are at the end of the police protection, the water supply, the parks and recreation and such. Importantly, in this standard, there's a strategic asset management plan function that can fold very neatly into ISO 55000. So whereas 55000 is kind of like high level, very good standard, this adds an element of engaging with people to find out if we're actually measuring the right things. And then the last standard that I have here is ISO 37120. You can see this is about cities and communities and quality of life. There's 144 global cities that are getting certified on this. And it's very important to be able to take some of these benchmarks, put it into the E3210, which is the standard I developed with ASTM to form a system that's addressing a sector of the economy. The next slide goes into exactly how these work. The figure on the left shows an idea of what a circular economy is, but it's really just showing a material flow. So rather than have a linear flow of materials, I like to focus on the right, which is a circular wealth flow. And you can see the authority revenue in the center, the revenue going to asset management and services. And then from there, you're increasing the value of urban land. And then down to the B, you have a total land value. So if you wanted to have equity in your provision of infrastructure, you create the infrastructure, maintain it, improve the land value, and then take a percentage of that land value to go into the for the revenue.
Marty, I'm gonna have to ask you on time to conclude. That was a very good summary. I know you've got a couple other slides. We'll make that available. And while we're switching to Dragan's slides,
No problem.
I will just like to say that the FDA, go ahead, Nick, and fire those up. I'm just saying that the FDA, which was reported as needing better information, we need to connect them to Len. But anyway, Dragan?
Hi, everybody. In fact, I'm going to present a few facts about engineering asset management at Hydro-Quebec. Next slide, please. And to introduce Hydro-Quebec in few numbers, it is one of largest electrical power utilities in North America, with numbers of presented here, almost 20,000 employees. And the total value of assets is almost 77 or 78 billion dollars. So what is the challenge here is that our generation capacity units are far in the north, and the main consumption centers are in the south. So it is more than 1,000 kilometers, and the transmission lines go through to very harsh climate conditions. So there are a lot of engineering and scientific challenges to keep all that system working. So we are also connected not only with Canadian customers, but Northeast USA, which is our good customer. Next slide, please. So what is the context? It is Hydro-Quebec is the part of our critical national infrastructures. And the challenge is that our assets are aging or become obsolete. So it is particularly true for IT and communication assets. So it requires large replacement and refurbishment. On top of that, we are facing also a growing complexity in our operational and business environment. New technologies, pandemics, climate change, extreme weather, market evolution, and so on and so on. And in this, the complexity and deep uncertainties in this context are to be managed. So, and that organization remains economically viable. In this regard, the organization considers that asset management is an efficient approach, offers an efficient framework for strong scientific and technical basis for rigorous decision making. It is combined with risk and resilience management. So many speakers before, several speakers before me mentioned that also. Hydro-Quebec is not certified ISO 55001, but it is ongoing discussion, but follows prescriptions in the concept as far as possible. What is also important is that Hydro-Quebec considers that research, development, and innovation are quite important in this regard. And since 2019, Hydro-Quebec and NSERC, which is a federal research agency, have supported a university research chair in asset management at the University in Quebec in Trois-Rivières. So our experience is that the strength of our Hydro-Quebec's asset management, it is basically managed at the level of its main throughout the three divisions, is in multidisciplinary holistic approach, collaboration, and long-term vision. Hydro-Quebec divisions at all levels of organization, it means top, bottom up. Hydro-Quebec Research Institute, universities, collaboration with industry peers, participation at various conferences, regulatory and the standardization body, and also with associations like International Society of Engineering Asset Management, International Asset Management, Institute of Asset Management, SIGRE, IEEE, IEC, and so on. So our experience and approach might be of interest for other organizations. Next slide, please. Based on our experience, we see some challenges in efficiently applying asset management. How to integrate new technologies, materials, scientific knowledge, artificial intelligence, and so on and so on. Smart things align the functions of an organization, engineering and non-engineering. Improving our methods and tools for life cycle cost modeling and decision-making support, diagnostic and prognostic, data acquisition and treatment, and developing new modeling and optimization methods able to grasp the complex operational and business environment and taking into account deep uncertainties. It is also a challenge to understand, model, and characterize impact of climate change on asset management, on asset management, cybersecurity, and many speakers have mentioned the importance of human factors and organizational factors. It is also our view that we have to better understand and model the impact of human and organizational performance, because people are key to succeed to break the system. So,
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dragan.
And the next slide is also
for time, we're going to have to just let the next slide go, and that will be available, and we're going to get into discussion now. And I want to start the discussion with Dr. Smith, if possible. What we've seen here is a number of different asset owners that impact a airport, the electricity, the transportation, and I wonder how you think ISO 55000 can help you interact with the other asset providers. Are you working with your electric suppliers for ISO, or the water suppliers, the MARTA, etc.? Is there some kind of overlap?
There hasn't been to date, Mike. We haven't worked with those partners that connect within the airport itself. We have worked primarily with our partners that help us from the company execute our fiduciary requirement to our shareholders, the maintenance providers. But to your point, let me answer it at a higher level. Those organizations, I would push and support and assist and help them with implementing ISO in their different jurisdictions, because it ultimately impacts and helps the airport. So if I can get the Department of, or DOT, Department of Transportation, if I can get MARTA, if I can get those other entities that tie into us to implement the ISO concept within their own organizations, is a huge benefit. And it's one of those things where all ships rise with the same tide. The better they get at doing what they do, the better they can provide the airport with what we need.
Dragan, do you interact with any of your customers on an ISO 55000 level?
Given that we are not certified ISO 55000, but we interact with our clients and suppliers also at that level, in particularly in this COVID-19 situation, it is a special case, so that we collaborate at this level in order to align our strategies.
Excellent. Amelia, you pointed out a issue of asset owner having problem with their information management. Now, you heard a little bit about LEN and what they're doing, and they even have an information strategy as part of their strategic asset management plan for their ISO. Not that you're, in charge of this, but do you see a value in having information management as a title for someone in agencies?
Well, I guess that depends. I mean, there are various ways that you could do that. Information management could be a title, yes. It could be done through different offices, but certainly one of our characteristics is having quality data, having quality information. So you can't possibly manage assets if you don't have good information about them. That was the point that we made in this report, and also in our first report. There's no way to manage your assets if you don't know, how much you're using them, their age, the quality, a number of factors. And that's what we found at the FDA. Even though it was personal property, you need to know the same thing about infrastructure, facilities and real property as well. So whether it's a quality information person, an information officer, or someone else who's doing other things as well, I think a lot of it has to do with technology and having the technology to keep track of that information.
Mm-hmm. Len, what kind of technologies do you use to help the different departments that you serve?
So Maximo is our enterprise asset management system. Data Splice is our mobility platform. We use a lockout tagout system. We use SAP for our financials and inventory management, just to name a few.
Mm-hmm. And go ahead.
Do you, so an authority is not really, I'm familiar, I used to work for OMB in New York City, so I'm familiar with the Power Authority, but you're not really a government entity. You have more flexibility in terms of the technology you're able to acquire.
Yeah, we like to be called a quasi-state agency. And yes, we do have latitude as to what technologies we use. Some are requirements from the state, as an example, our fleet management system. But for the most part, we do have latitude in that area.
So that's one of the differences, between a federal agency and a non-governmental agency.
Mm-hmm. Len, how do you and Mildred interact on information exchanges? Do you?
We do. We're both part of the IAM New York chapter, so we've exchanged information through that as a forum. We've given presentations, and we also have talked a little bit about our enterprise asset management systems with Mildred as well, and how we're pursuing it, different areas around it as well.
Right. There's a lot of information sharing between us with NYPA, the Port Authority, for example, other entities in New York, because it's the same model. Asset information is key, also from an MTA perspective. And we deal with the FDA all the time because we get federal grants, right? And there's a requirement to put together a TAM plan. And that requires asset information really to be maintained over time in order to be able to develop your strategies, right? So what's really interesting is that I know that working with the Power Authority, they focused on asset information and really building that model out, which is phenomenal. I mean, we were like in awe in what they've been able to do. We focus much more on organization and strategy, right? Which is a very different focus. And now we're just getting into really building out the system and the asset information and tying that all together. So we also have developed asset information standards now. Like, we're further along in that journey, but not anywhere near where NYPA is, right? We'd like to get to where NYPA is, because once every entity in the New York area has similar levels of maturity, the language of ISO 55000 is universal. It doesn't matter what sector you are, you're able to communicate right along those lines, even though you may have different businesses and different perspectives. It brings you all together, and I think that is really wonderful to have. So that we're striving to do this approach.
Yeah, and I think to the point Mildred made, we're very lucky that those that came before us had the foresight to see things like having one enterprise asset management system, Maximo, across all of NYPA. So generation, transmission, facilities, all one version of Maximo, same version. Everything, we have an asset maintenance manual, which is our governing document on how we do things, represented by each of our facilities. So we have governance, we have system, and we really pull it all together to have what we need to do to move forward. That's one of the things the auditors were impressed in when they came, that we have that standardization across all of our different entities.
Right.
Excellent. So we're winding down on time here, and want Nick to pop up and let us thank our sponsors while I'm thanking all of the speakers. I wish we had a day with all of you, because the interchange of information is very rich, and I think it can lead to some dramatic improvements to the organizations that we care about. So Dr. Smith, thank you so much. We really appreciate your leadership in this area and look forward to further communications. Amelia, thank you for your continued support and interest in bringing us this great information. We'll be talking more about the FDA and really want to make sure that we help you with the April report when that comes out. Marty, thank you so much. I wish I had time to ask you about the benefits that people had been experiencing, but we'll get around to that. Dragon, that was very good, quick, comprehensive overview, and we look forward to much more from you. Dragon has so many reports. We'll be making them available. He's got a wealth of information. And Mildred and Len, we've already said we want to help you in any way as you move forward with that. So thank you so much for coming out. Have I missed anyone, Nick? I think I covered everybody.
Thank
Very
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.